games. So today's session is sponsored by the SDSU Department of English and Comparative Literature and by the SDSU Library. And it is called, we like big titles to get everyone to come, Can Indie Music Save the World? It's totally fine if we never even discussed that topic. It was just to get people to come. The mission accomplished. And our guest is Sean Bohrman, who is the co-founder of Weiner Records. So the class in question, it starts with this question about the relationship between independent production and social politics in the arts. So it's like experimental modernist writers, would they have been able to do their thing, or would they even have existed if not for DIY publication systems with new technologies that made it possible to publish your own stuff or start your own journals? And that happened in the early 20th century. Would things like Riot Grrrl in music have happened if not for photocopiers to make zines and indie labels to put out music that would not get onto major labels? And looking forward, with indie video game production and distribution, should we expect new forms of socially progressive games in a world where you can make your own games and that push beyond the white male-dominated audiences and producers that currently are at play in the video game industry? So I have been obsessed with indie music since I was a teenager. Although I grew up in a town called London, Ontario in Canada, my imagination was always in places like the real London in England, or in places with amazingly Greek names like Olympia, Washington, or Athens, Georgia, these places with these really vibrant indie music scenes. So in my 20s, I moved to Toronto in Canada, which had a pretty cool music scene, and that was nice. And then when I found out I was moving to San Diego, I was kind of like, okay, good weather, surfing, cycling, but I racked my brains a bit about what is the music that is from here that I'm into. One of the reasons that I started this class was just to meet cool people from San Diego who would come to my class, and that was really good. And one of the first people that I met, a student of mine named Angela, the first week of class was like, hey, you should really go to this thing called Burger A Go-Go that's happening like next weekend. And so I went, and it was awesome, and I began to feel at home. It's an all-female music festival. The headliners were Kathleen Hanna, her band The Julie Ruin, Sean Marshall, Cat Power, Kim Gordon was playing, and I got to meet new local heroes like Cherry Glazer and the Aqua Dolls and Peach Kelly Pop. So as someone from the East Coast, going to this festival, I've got to say, was one of the strangest experiences that I had ever had, because where I'm from, there's like a scene, and there are bars, and there are clubs, and it's all in the same neighborhood, and you walk there or ride your bike there. Here I was, I drove really far to get there. I parked in like an industrial complex in front of a biotech company. I walked to this anonymous looking club that was between like a Home Depot and a hospital. And I went in, and it's like, whoo, there was the scene. It was like young, badass people making stuff, and it felt pretty cool. And it made me think that it's one thing to build a scene in a place that's built to have a scene, and it's another heroic act to create a scene in an industrial park. So this is Sean Bohrman's
hello,
amazing achievement. Okay, so tell me about growing up, like how important was music to you as a kid?
It was really important. My dad played in bands since I was a little kid, since I was born, before I was born. He was in a band called Radio London in Fresno, and then he was in the Pet Boys, and then the auto parts people gave him a cease and desist, so they became the P-Boys, and then they still weren't happy, so they became Passion. And then all growing up, they practiced every Thursday. I remember trying to watch Seinfeld on Thursdays and like having to have the volume at the very top level because my dad's band would practice every Thursday, and Thursday was must-see TV. So
yeah.
What kind
of music were they playing?
They covered The Damned and The Clash. The lead singer was way into Iggy Pop, so all their flyers had like Lust for Life lyrics on it, and they covered The Dentists, and they had some original songs as well. And they were my first memory of my dad is him wearing a clip-on skeleton earring and having black eyeliner, and me looking up at him and like being just weirded out. But I can still picture it. He became a born-again Christian and started playing Christian music. Now he's a musicianary, and really proud of him for what he did, but it was never like that.
So how do you rebel if your parents are already into really cool music?
Well, my mom isn't into cool music at all, so my dad, he just let me do whatever. He was really strict with like R-rated movies and things like that, and video games, and he was very thrifty. So my mom is like the exact opposite. They got divorced, and then I moved in with my mom, and my stepsister was listening to, she had a cassette that had like the Stitches and some local punk bands on it. The Toy Dolls were, well, not local, but they're on there, and I borrowed it, and then I started borrowing her Misfits CDs and Ramones CDs, and from there I bought Ramones Greatest Hits, and then I bought Iggy Pop, Nude and Rude, Best Of, and I bought Misfits Collection 2, and those were the first 3 CDs I bought that kind of pushed me into a different direction as far as, because I listened to Soundgarden and stuff. You know, I listened to rap music and pop music, and I still do listen to all that stuff, but as far as like really getting into music and collecting records and stuff, that was definitely the first 3. And then I remember having to go on a family vacation, and we each got to pick out 1 CD, and I picked out this Iggy and the Stooges' Raw Power, and I listened to it the entire weekend we were there, and all of my family was mad at me because I didn't want to talk to anybody and I was antisocial, but that album changed our lives. And my friend Lee, who I started Burger with, we were in a band called The Noise in high school, and our thing was that our friends' bands, they were just crappy punk bands, and we're like, we can be a crappy punk band and we don't even need to practice or know what we're doing or know how to play. So we would go on shows and we'd just break stuff, and I have a scar right here from a bass hitting my chin, and I have a scar running right here from when we smashed a guitar on my head, and we would just go crazy. But we recorded our first album before any of our friends recorded an album. We went on tour before any of our friends, but we never practiced. We didn't really have songs. We would just go up and get kicked off, and that was, and then people would kick us off and say, "You're not even music," and then me and Lee would corner them and start yelling at them about performance art and things like that. And so that was kind of the beginning of me and Lee collaborating. And I had a zine in high school called The Newsletter that it was probably one of the biggest life-changing things for me, in that I met all of my friends who are my friends through the newsletter. Before the newsletter, I was very antisocial. I was still antisocial while the newsletter was going, but before, like eating my lunch by myself, you know, drawing cartoon characters by myself, and just being really a weirdo. And
so how did you get the notion to make a zine, and what was like
so
the zine scene like?
There was no, I didn't know what zines were. I was running laps in PE, and I was thinking about all these weird thoughts about like penguins taking over the world, and like what I would do, like why we got, I don't know, it's not even worth explaining the weird stuff that was in it, but I had all these weird thoughts, and I was like, I should write these things down. So I went home that night and I made the Sean Bohrman newsletter, and then I made a second copy. And then with the second copy, I got transferred into the honors biology class, and they didn't have a seat, so I had to go sit in the back of the class. And my friend Dana Bell was sitting there, and he was the first person I met when I moved to Orange County. And I remember we traded Mortal Kombat 2 codes in English class. And then I met him again in the back of this biology class. He was sitting back there because he got in trouble for talking too much. And I showed him the newsletter, and he was like, I want to help you with that. And then we started collaborating, and we released the newsletter. And I eventually got suspended from school because I did this thing called the hate list, which was just things I hated. And there were some teachers on there, and it wasn't violent or threatening at all. Like, my name was on the hate list, and it was just a big joke. But they tried to kick me out of school. They left me alone with a police officer for like half an hour, and they were interrogating me and asking me like, so were you trying to start a riot? Well, they didn't ask me that. They made me imply that I was trying to start a riot. Like, they're like, do you think you could have started a riot? I'm like, you never know what can happen with these things. And so after that, I got suspended for my own safety, and they tried to send me to a different school, and I got a lawyer, and they were accusing me of smoking marijuana, and before then, at that time, I wasn't. And it was just this whole big confusing mess. And when I went to the local school placement meeting, the teachers, the principals were like, I left him alone with the police officer maybe 30 seconds. And I got up, I was like, it was like 30 minutes I was alone in there with this guy, but it's against the law to leave a student with the police officer alone with no school official. So they lied, and then that teacher ended up getting transferred to another school the next year. And my parents were like, you can't make the newsletter anymore. And so I was like, all right, but I kept secretly making the newsletter throughout the year and hiding it from them. And then a year later, I did the hate list too for the year anniversary, and I got caught again. And that time I remember I got called into the office, and they're like, we got you this time. And I'm like, oh God. And they transferred me to a different school. I had to go to Loera for a year and a half, and then I got transferred back and got to graduate. But it was a big, crazy thing. And before I got transferred to Loera, I was like partying all the time. My grades were slipping. But once they transferred me to the other school, I was like, I don't want to meet anybody here. I don't want to make any friends. I just want to do my stuff and get out of there. And that's what I did. And I brought all my grades up and got into college, went to college, did it in 4 years, and worked in an office as a art director for a boating and fishing magazine for 5 years. And then quit that job, cashed out my 401k, and started Burger, the store, 6 years ago. And
so you had like a genuine brush with authority that kind of got you started on this.
Yeah.
So like, who did you send your zine to? And were you reading other zines, or did you even call it a zine at the time?
I didn't know what zines were. I learned because I did research afterwards, and I bought like books on zines and stuff, and I started researching on the internet. And this is back in the late 90s, and bought some books. I found out there's a store called Quimby's in Chicago that specializes in zines, and they're the only store in the United States that I could see that carried zines. So I sent my zine there, and they carried it, and I actually got to go to Chicago, and I took a picture of myself next to my zine in their shop, and it was cool. I mostly did it for my friends, and it was like I would record conversations with my friends and not tell them, and then like 3 months later, the newsletter would come out, and it'd be like our entire conversation or our entire hanging out. Or if somebody would tell me a secret, I'd write it down in the newsletter.
Really?
Yeah. It was really mean. I couldn't do the newsletter now because it was kind of mean-spirited in a funny kind of way, and things that I thought were funny. I'm not into that. Like, I don't want to make people sad anymore.
But that
was high school, you know? That's what high school's for.
So,
and then in college, I worked on the newspaper in college, and I did a column called I Hate Sean Bohrman, where I would write about partial birth abortion, and I'd write about war, and I'd be really like graphic and gross, and like I was in Humboldt, so there was a lot of hippies and a lot of I would be like the other side of what everybody was rebelling against, and they would get pages and pages of people writing in like Sean Bohrman off base, like just there. I have a whole book full of responses to my stupid articles, and it was a joke. It was a big old joke, and I didn't go to parties or do anything in college except do my schoolwork. And then I did this one thing that pissed off a lot of people, and the women's studies people were going to the journalism department and like getting in the teachers' faces about why they would let people print that stuff, and it was like bringing up all these issues, and it was just me. No, I didn't have any friends. It was just like, there's that weirdo kid who's writing these stories and pissing everybody off. And then it was probably the greatest thing I did in college, definitely. My favorite thing, at least.
Yeah. So when you were a kid, was indie or like DIY something that was important to you? Like, did you ever identify with like indie culture?
I guess in a way, not that I was like, oh, this is indie, I'm indie. Like, it was mostly like, I'm doing this thing and like, oh, zines, there's other people making these zines too, and they've been making it since the 80s or the 70s or even the 60s. And it was, I never, like when I was really young, I wrote books. I wrote The Quest and I wrote The Quest 2 and I wrote these little adventure stories. And then after that, I started Trash Can Comics when I was in junior high, and I had Flyman and Maggot Boy and Paper Bag Boy, and I had all these superheroes, and I did the Trash Can Comics thing, and then I did the newsletter after that, and then after the newsletter I did Burger Records, and my whole life I've had like these projects that I work on, not for really anybody except for myself, but Burger Records is the first one that people start paying attention to it, and it actually becomes something, and it's amazing just being a part of musical history.
How important do you think scenes are for what you did? Like, it sounds like you worked pretty independently for a long time, and now you have...
Growing up in high school, there was a scene at our high school where all the weirdos hung out. There was a band called the Four Letter Words that people would go see, and they played like 3 times a week, and 100 kids from our school would go, and that's how I met all of our friends, and that's how I met Lee at a Four Letter Word show. I was making fun of him for having long hair, and now I have long hair, and from there we just like started hanging out and listening to Devo and go and see movies and stuff, and we always collaborated just easily because he's a very outgoing, extroverted type. He goes to shows and everything, and I'm the hermit, introverted person who doesn't go out. So you're lucky to have me today because I usually don't do these things.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess one of the things that scenes can do is introduce the introverts to the extroverts.
Exactly. Yeah.
You always need both. So okay, you're at the southernmost CSU campus right now. You went to the northernmost CSU. Why did you go to Humboldt and study journalism, and what was it like there?
I studied journalism because of the newsletter, because I made zines and I wanted to write and I wanted to design. And once I started the journalism, I was like, I don't really like journalism. Like writing about meetings and things at like city planning meetings is not what I want to do with my life. So I like doing the opinion pieces and stuff, but you're not going to make any money off of that. So I did the graphic design, and I chose Humboldt because it was the farthest away from where I was. I didn't know anybody there. I just moved there, and I spent 4 years there. I did all my thing and got it all done. Moved back. All my friends were still living at home. Nothing had changed. Like, I missed a couple cool shows. That was about the only thing I missed in the 4 years that I went there. So moving away and just getting it done really quick was the best thing. And right when I moved back, I was like, let's get a place. And I got all my friends, and we got a house, and it turned into like the first punk house that our little group of friends had, and it got too punk for me, and I moved out about a year and a half after. And yeah, so I've always been like the one to, let's do this, guys, come on. And getting people to go on tour and record and do all that stuff. Now I do it for other bands instead of myself.
All right, so how does a person start a label? Like, what was the process? What were the first thoughts? And then how do you...
We had a band called The Makeout Party, and we toured all the time, and we played all the time, and nobody cared. And I was working a full-time job at the time that required me to be there at like 5 or 6 in the morning, so we'd play till like 2 or 3. I'd go home and sleep for 3 hours, and I'd go work all day, and then I'd practice and do it over. And that was our lives. Like, before the Burger Makeout Party was what we did with everything.
Were you in this band through Humboldt Days?
No. Lee started the Makeout Party when the noise stopped after I moved to college. And then when I moved back, I joined the band, and then we recorded some songs and didn't have anybody to put out the single, so we did it ourselves and paid for it ourselves, and we're like, hey, we can do this. So we were doing a split with this band called Audacity, who were still in high school at the time, and we had a meeting with the other label in Audacity, and at that meeting I was like, you guys want us to do your record, like on Burger Records, because we had just done the Makeout Party single? And they're like, yeah. And I wanted to put out this 10-inch that had never been released, and one of the, Thomas, the drummer, wasn't on that, so he was like, no, like, I don't want you to release that, I'm not even on that. And so we took them in the studio and recorded their first record, and that was kind of us getting into other bands and releasing other bands. And then we were at Kirby's Beer Store in Kansas. We were on tour, and we had just released our cassette, our album, the Make Out Parties album on cassette. And I remember sitting in the parking lot after the show, and I was like, just, you know, sitting there. I was like, what if we put out all these other bands like that we listened to on tape? Like, wouldn't that be awesome? And then we had these 3 tapes we were listening to, or these albums, The Go, How in the Honda Beat You Ride, Apache, Apache's first album, Boomtown Gems, and The Traditional Fools, which is Ty Siegel's band, his band at the time. And I got on our computer and I emailed them from the parking lot, and that started kind of the snowball of the tape thing, and that really allowed us to get our foot in the door as far as collaborating with Vice and collaborating with Sub Pop and Universal and Warner Brothers and whoever else, Converse, Vans.
We were in our class, we were talking a bit about like the Olympia scene in K Records. In the very first K newsletter, there's this picture of the K Shield is defeating the corporate ogre, which is like a mini tentacled beast, and on each of the arms is a 7-inch, and then the K Shield is throwing a cassette, and the cassette destroys the corporate ogre. So, like, what led you to cassettes? Well, it sounds like it was more like the fact that established bands simply were not releasing
Yeah,
cassettes.
No one was releasing cassettes at the time, and we had a cassette player in the van, so it was mostly for us listening in the van, listening to our favorite albums in the van, and it was just easy, and it sounded good, and it was cheap. I put in $100, and Lee put in $100, and that was our first cassette release. And then eventually the cassettes started paying for themselves, and No Bunny, Raw Romance was our big seller. We just sold 500 in a week and a half, and that was kind of opened our eyes that we could do this, and started opening other people's eyes as far as bands hitting us up, and it's hard to really do something and look at it and be like, wow, I did this, and like take a second, and it's mostly just like working, and the tape comes in, you're like, whoa, that's cool, working. It's like you don't even have time to really think about all the hard work and everything that you did to do it, because there's so much stuff coming up again. And that really didn't start till like 4 years ago. The first couple of years we were releasing maybe 10 to 20 tapes a year. And then I don't know what happened, but it was my fault. I did it. I don't know how it happened. I can't tell you the point where it was like we're releasing 3 cassettes a week or 4 cassettes a week, and that started like 4 years ago. We did like 300 releases in 1 year, and then I was like, we're not doing that again, and then we did it again, and it's like, God, it's hard to. It's like a snowball. It just keeps going faster and faster, and it gets to a point where you're not running along with it, you're running behind it, and you're kind of just trying to keep up with this burger thing that's going kind of on its own now.
How many people run Burger now, for the record?
Me and Lee. Charisse posts stuff on the social media, and there's like
3 people.
3 or 4 people sometimes. 4.
Yeah. So it feels like we were talking before, I was in Japan this summer. I went into a store, I saw a Burger sweatshirt. It's like, wow, Burger is huge.
Yeah, and
Burger's 3 people.
That was, because we did a pop-up shop in Tokyo, Japan. We say yes to that's our thing, is we say yes. So if people want to do stuff, we're like, sure, and see what happens. And that was one thing where at the beginning of this year, actually, we believe in The Secret and picturing things that are going to happen and believing positively. It's super hard to do. Just being positive is the hardest thing, at least for me, because there's so many negative things, especially in the music business, that you have to think positively and like block out all the bad shit that's happening. And at the beginning of this year, I was like, we're going to go international this year. Like, we've toured the United States a million times. We want to go international. And so within a month of me like thinking international, Japan, Europe, Australia, we got an email from Japan saying, you want to do a pop-up shop here? And we're like, sure. And he said, okay, we want to fly you out too. And it was like, oh, cool. And so within like a month and a half of me starting the year and being like, we're going to do this, I was in Japan cutting the ribbon on a burger pop-up shop in the Shibuya district, which was pretty wild. And sitting there and watching just regular Japanese people go and buy shirts and burger shirts, and it's pretty mind-blowing to think that Lee just doodled that while he was at work one day, and it's become this thing. But you never know how these things happen or where they're going to happen. None of it was planned. We didn't go into this being like, okay, we're going to do this and this and this. It was like closing our eyes and falling backwards and hoping that somebody catches us. And not all the time. We fall sometimes, but you just learn from. I feel like we never do anything right the first time. We always mess it up and then be like, okay, let's never do that again, and then go on from there. But
so if someone in the audience, for instance, wanted to record like a single or a cassette, how much would it cost, and what steps would be involved to release their own stuff?
For a cassette, it's really easy. You just need the music, the artwork, and you submit it to Mike McKinney at M2Com, and within 3 weeks you have your tapes, and that's awesome. It's really easy. For any kind of vinyl, we're at like 18, 20 weeks waiting time for our vinyl now, which is, the vinyl industry is messed up.
They're working with old machines.
There's no new machines. The only person who can build a new machine is in Czechoslovakia, and they're working for this one company he's only making them for them. So in America, there's no new record pressing plants. Any kind of new pressing plant that's opening, they found an old machine somewhere and they refurbished it. And so there's a very limited amount. And with all the media hype behind vinyl coming back, you're getting a lot more people buying vinyl, which is great. You're getting more major retailers selling vinyl, which is great. And you're getting reissues of some albums that don't need to be reissued, which is not so great. Like Paul Simon records you see for $1 everywhere. They're reissuing them for $20, and you're like, why? And
Poco records.
Yeah, and it's only because they see dollar signs. Like they're like, we have this Poco record that we have the rights to. Let's put it on vinyl and remaster it or something. And that is what's holding up stuff. So when the Beatles make a record, any kind of vinyl, it will hold up the entire industry. It'll it's insane. And when Record Store Day happens, the entire industry is set back, and it happens twice a year. So from right now, pretty much, because I just put in our orders for Record Store Day 2016 in April. So from now till March, the record pressing industry is totally backed up, and from about July to November, it's totally backed up. And so it's a mess. It's a huge mess, and it just keeps getting worse.
All right, this is sort of a related question. So it's easy today to record and release music digitally. Like anyone with a laptop can make a pretty decent record using GarageBand, and you can put it on SoundCloud or whatever. So what are labels for now? What do labels do?
Well, for me, my job is to make the bands happy. My job is, if you're a band, you're not going to sit there and be like, I'm the best band ever. You need somebody next to you being, this guy's in the best band ever, because if he says it, you're like, what a conceited asshole, come on. But if I say, like, well, this guy likes some other bands that I like, and if he's saying that this guy's good, maybe I'll give him a chance. So that's what my job is to be a cheerleader for bands, to make sure bands are happy. And that's the hardest part, because we have like 850 bands on our label. We're like at 1,000-something releases right now. And so I get 200 emails a day from bands and managers and any kind of people wanting to throw shows with us and demos and everything. And every day I answer all my emails and I wake up and it's just there again. And that's like 3 hours of my day is answering emails pretty much. And then got to do hype. So my typical day for me, I have a piece of paper that I have everything that I need to get done, and I'll cross it off as I go down each thing. And before that, I just started implementing these pieces of paper that I would print out. I would write down everything that I need to do, and I have like 6 years of notebooks for every single day. I write down everything that needs to be done. And even if I don't finish it, I'll go to the next day and I'll write it again. And there's some things that I've written for years that never got done, but every day I write it and I remember subscription service. I never did that, but it's on my list. It's still on my list.
So you say that you're not sure how it became a successful label, but it's pretty clear that it's because you're obsessive. And
I'm a workaholic.
Yeah.
I live at the shop, so I don't have a house. I live in the record shop, and I've lived there for 6 years. There's no shower, there's no kitchen, and I wake up at 11 a.m. and the shop opens, and I sit down and I start working, and I don't stop working until 5 a.m., 4 a.m. And I've been on that schedule for 3 years now. Before, and it just keeps getting crazier and crazier and more work. But I feel like with this little piece of paper that I cross off stuff, I'm actually getting a handle and catching up on deadlines, and because I do a lot of the designing, I do all the hype. If you see anything that's written on Instagram or anything, I wrote it and I hyped it. And if you go to a show, I probably helped book it and made the flyer and did all that stuff. So I do so many things, and I'm a control freak, and that's how I am, and it's something I've accepted. I'm the guy who, if I'm sitting in the passenger seat of your car, I'm hitting the brake that's not there, trying to stop the car, because I don't like being not in control of the brake. I like being in control. So that's been part of the hardest thing for me, is giving up things and being like, okay, you can handle this part of the business, and I don't have to worry about it. But you got to rip it out of my hands, kind of, to do that.
Right. It seems like if Burger keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, this will be a bigger problem for you, right?
It is. It's already a huge problem. I don't want to stay up till 5 a.m. every night answering emails and working on stuff. But at the same time, at 5 a.m., I'm like, shit, I got to go to bed. And I'm laying in bed. I'm like, I want to fall asleep as fast as I can so I can wake up and I can start working again. And that's just how I am. It's been beaten into me to do right and to do good and to make, going to school is make my parents happy, make my parents proud. And now it's make my bands happy, make my bands proud. Mm-hmm. And
so clearly Burger couldn't exist without you, but also I'm sure couldn't exist without Lee. So what is Lee?
Lee is the Flava Flav of Burger. He's the guy who goes to shows, he goes on tour, he helps booking, and he finally got an email I threw everything in there. I was like, I can't do this anymore. He didn't have an email for years. He got an email about 1.5 years ago, and it's been awesome for me because I don't have to he handles some of the booking and some of the stuff that I really don't need to. So he finally got a cell phone, which was still 1.5 years ago. And so before, he was off the grid completely. And it was really hard being the only if anybody came online looking for something on Burger, they would have to go through me. So now I can forward stuff to Lee and be like, you take care of this. I don't want to do this. And the accounting and stuff, he doesn't do that, but I do that, and the taxes and all that stuff. And
all right, shifting somewhat, is there a sound like when you're listening to bands or whatever and choosing what to put out, do you think you need to sound like X, there's a Burger thing?
People say they write about the Burger sound and stuff, and I see that just because our friends make garage music, make punk music, and for me, I like the Beatles, but what I like even more are the people who were inspired by the Beatles and the more obscure bands. So when we put out bands like Pangea, who are great, but I really like all the bands that are inspired by Pangea, all the people in high school who are just starting to play music and be like, oh, I kind of like this band, I want to sound like them. So people say, oh, a lot of their stuff sounds the same, but that's only because there's people inspired by, we're tracing the lines of who inspired who, and
we talked a lot in our class about some of the early punk bands. They were inspired not by the Beatles, but by the Nuggets compilation of early American garage rock, that kind of stuff. You like that too? You're a Nuggets fan?
Yeah, of course. From listening to punk music, I heard Nils Lofgren 1+1 on tour, and it really changed the way that I listen to music. It's just a fantastic record, really obscure record you can find for a couple bucks, but I listened to it over and over, and it changed my life kind of. And then we were at a record store in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and Lee picked up Best of Bee Gees Volume 1, and he's like, you need to get this. And I got it and took it back to college and listened to it, and it changed my life, really. And bubblegum. I love bubblegum music. For me personally, I collect cartoon bands, so I collect Banana Splits and the Chattanooga Cats and the Archies, and that's my thing. But the Bee Gees are my favorite band of all time, and
How about the Monkees?
I love the Monkees, and they inspire how we run our business and how we look at stuff. Them and Castanets Cats, who were the bubblegum masterminds, they wrote songs for Ohio Express and 1910 Fruit Gum Company, and all, Don Kirshner with the Archies. We're totally inspired by all that stuff. And not just that, but we have like a really thorough knowledge of the history of rock and roll and psych music. And when I was working in the office, I would work for 5 hours, and then I'd spend 5 hours researching music. And I went through the Acid Archives, I went through the Tapestry of Delights, Record Collector Dreams, all these extremely rare books that just got into the most obscure bands that didn't even put anything out but recorded one song, but still somebody wrote about them somewhere. So I would just use all my time researching, and at the time you could find rare music on blogs and stuff. So I have tons and tons of this rare music that I would research all day, listen to the next day while I'm researching more music, and have my work window open, so if my boss walked by I could throw it open really quick and he would see me working. But really half that job was me researching music and kind of getting into just experimenting with stuff and different kinds of things from all around the world. And me and Lee would go to the swap meets every Saturday morning, and if something looked cool, we'd buy it and go home and look at who the producer was and who the engineer was and who wrote this song and that song, and kind of piecing together this web of music, which is what Burger is doing as well, is making connections between these bands that might not necessarily have any right to be connected, from rap music to punk music to pop music to ambient music. Burger being this centralized thing that everything's connected to is awesome for me, because I love, on the way here we were listening to Kiss FM, and I was singing along to all the songs because I love pop music. I love hooks. I love, so if people are trying to get on Burger Records, put hooks in your songs.
Last week I was reading Carrie Brownstein's autobiography, Slater-Kinney, and she was talking a lot about in that book, like the rules of the Olympia scene that she was part of became so restrictive about how like you can't sign on a major label and you can't sound like this, you can't sound like that. And eventually, like a big thing for her was just getting over that. It seems like it took her like a decade. It seems like in your world, this like the notion of a mainstream as something that you're afraid of is maybe not so present.
No, I think Britney Spears is punk, and if you really look at it and look at her music and how she carries herself, and she might be a zombie kind of like puppet type thing, but there were, the Sex Pistols were the same thing. You had Malcolm McLaren pulling the strings on him, and I want people who like punk music to like Britney Spears. So I want to put out Britney Spears, and I want to put out the Sex Pistols, and I want people to see, oh, it's okay to listen to this and enjoy it, because I like all types of music. And with the label, if people really take a look at what we put out, they can see there's all sorts of music and all sorts of things, and it just, with tapes, you're able to experiment and put out stuff that if we're just putting out vinyl, there's no way we could put out all these bands or put out all these debut records or take chances on bands, or our friend Mom, who makes this super extremely weird, not even music, it's just sounds and kind of loopy, scary stuff. And if we were putting out vinyl, we couldn't do it because we'd lose all our money and no one would buy it. But we could put out a tape, and if nobody buys the tape, that's cool. It's no big loss to us, but there might be 5 people who buy the tape and we're like, oh my God, this is crazy, I love it. And that's what it's all about.
So in a world where there is no Burger Records, like what role do you think like labels like Burger contribute to the bigger cultural or musical landscape?
For us personally, I see like how the Ramones, when they would go on tour and all these punk bands would pop up behind them after they would go through a town, and all these people would see, oh my God, I could do this. This could be me. That's what I feel like Burger is helping do. Like, I talk to people all the time who are starting labels that saw us and are inspired by what we're doing because they see us and they see us working with 3 people and everything we're doing. They're like, oh, I could probably do that. And for me, that's amazing to inspire people to do their own thing and to start their own thing. And we do the Burger Revolution every year, which is where we throw shows all around the world. But we don't really throw the shows. We just get our fans to throw Burger shows. And it's a way of showing kids who have never thrown a show before that they can do something within their community. And that's one of the most important things. And being a part of music history. And you know, if we have a sentence in music history books in San Diego State University in 50 years, if there's a sentence that says, oh, and Burger Records made cassettes for 10 years or something, and that would be amazing. Like, that's my dream. Just creating a legacy, something that'll be remembered fondly.
While we're on the mainstream topic, a lot of the big, especially the 80s and 90s, a lot of the pioneering indie labels really saw themselves as having like a big social mission. So like Bruce Pavitt, for instance, in Sub Pop, in his zine, he wrote the following. He said, only by supporting new ideas by local artists, bands, and record labels can the U.S. expect any kind of dynamic social or cultural change in the 1980s. This is because the mass homogenization of our culture is due to the claustrophobic centralization of our culture. Do you think in terms of these big ideas, or is it just something that...
We are in our own little bubble. Before, we don't keep up with the news, we don't do politics. I am totally obsessed with, my life is Burger Records. Mm-hmm. And there's it's really hard to get out of that. Like, I like going to see movies, I like playing video games. Like, these are stuff I did before Burger Records took over my entire life. And now I don't do it anymore. All I do is work and go towards this never-ending goal. It's like when I was a kid, I played video games. I played sim games like SimCity and stuff, and build your own pizza parlor or whatever it is. And that's how I see Burger, is this kind of unending video game of, only there's real consequences and real people and things, but I see it as like just growing and building experience. And like, I played role-playing games as a kid, so I try and incorporate that kind of stuff in it, like campaigns for bands. When I'm trying to hype a new record or something, I was like, my dad never let me play Dungeons and Dragons because it was Satan, whatever, it was evil. So now that I'm older, I can't play because I don't have time anymore. And when I do stuff like that, it's like I feel guilty because I just think about everything I really need to be getting done. So I forgot where I was going with this. I'm sorry.
How do you feel about when you have a band that's like a Burger band that you have cultivated, and then they want to go off to other places? Like, a lot of labels, like thinking of, say, like Rough Trade and the Smiths, like they fought as hard as they could to keep the Smiths, and they changed their like policy in their contract to keep them. But then other labels like Postcard in Scotland would be like, we have a cool band like Orange Juice, we're totally happy to be just a stepping stone, and we want them to go off and become big.
I don't like being a stepping stone. I would like to build something real. Like, I want the bands to stay with us because they see the potential, and because we're good to them and we do everything we can. But bands have managers, and it's really easy to see through some managers where they just see us as the next step to something bigger. Mm-hmm. And I don't fight. If somebody's trying to go to another label, I don't kick and scratch and claw. I'm like, if you don't want to be part of this, then that's your choice. But they're always going to be part of it. So it's, when you're in the Burger family, you're in it for life. So even if they do go to another label, I'll still hype everything that they do, and I'll still treat them as if they are on Burger Records, because they are. And bands like The Garden and Cherry Glazer and that are going on to bigger things and better things and different labels. The Garden we were able to do with Epitaph. That was the only way we were going to be able to do The Garden's next album was through a joint venture with Epitaph, because their manager has stars in his eyes and he wants big things. But the only reason that happened is because of us. Like, he saw us and he's like, I'm not messing with them. And he tried to get on Epitaph just by himself, and they kept rejecting him. And then we went to Epitaph, we were like, you should really do The Garden. And then they accepted it. Mm-hmm. So it's like, what are managers for, really?
So tell me about, like, what's the scene like in Orange County these days? Like, and how does it all fit together? Is it like a nice ecosystem? Like, do people are doing zines in the Orange County, and like, where do people go to shows, and where's it all happening?
In Orange County, it's really, really different than LA. There's not a lot of places to go to shows. There's like, if it's an all ages, there might be 2 or 3 places you can go see all ages shows. And even there's one, the Observatory is like the one place that is going to be there. All the other all ages places are closing down every 3 months and reopening somewhere else. So it's really hard in that sense, but there's a lot of great bands that keep popping up, and those bands are inspired by the bands that came before them, and we like putting out bands in high school and putting out kids just making their first songs and stuff, because it's fun discovering bands.
How do they find it? How do you find out about them? Do they send you their stuff?
They send us stuff every day, all the time.
Uh-huh.
And I don't necessarily get to listen to all that stuff unless they say something really incredible in the first sentence, and I'm like, wow, I really should listen to this. Or if there's people who send us these crazy packages, and it's like, well, I have to listen to their thing now. It's like the school project where they have all their band names and likes and dislikes and everything. I don't know. It's just overboard.
Do they mostly send you things in the mail, like tapes?
We probably get like 3 to 5 things in the mail every day. Wow. And then emails, I probably get like 10 to 15 demos. And that's how we did. Weiner Records was our subsidiary, and I just forwarded all the demos to Weiner Records, and that's how we discovered Michael Ralt. He submitted to be a Weiner record, and it was so good that we did it on Burger and Wax Witches, and there's a few bands that have made the jump.
So how did the Burger A Go Go idea come around? It's an all-female or female-centric music festival.
Well, we grew up, Lilith Fair was big growing up, and so that kind of all-girl fest was kind of somewhere floating in our heads. And after we did Burgerama, the day after we did Burgerama 3, we sat down with the Observatory and we're like, we want to do an all-girl fest. And they were like, of course, yeah, let's do it. And it kind of just happened really, really easily and naturally. People at the Observatory are awesome. It's the best venue. And the people who run it are great. They don't pay me anything to say that. I'm just saying that because I work with a lot of bookers and a lot of venues and things, and they're the kindest and easiest to work with for sure. And they're local.
I heard there's some talk of exporting Burger A Go Go, like to other places. Or?
Definitely. We want to do Burger A Go Go tours in Europe and Japan and in the USA as well. And for us, Burgerama isn't just like an Orange County thing. It's a world thing. So we want to throw Burgeramas in Australia and Europe and Canada and anywhere we can. So we're working on that as well and just expanding, always growing and moving.
What are you proudest of that Burger has achieved?
That there's people sitting here right now interested. That's the greatest thing. Because like I said, from when I was like 5 or 6, I've been making things, writing books and doing zines and making comic books and all these things. And you know, if we were sitting here talking about Trash Can Comics, no one would be here. If we were sitting here talking about the newsletter, maybe a couple zine enthusiasts would be here. But to create something that people care about and they're interested in is just the most incredible thing ever. And that's the only reason why I do it. And when I'm like down on how much work I have to do or something, I'm like, well, there's so many kids that like care about this thing. I should probably keep doing it. I should probably get back to work. And so that's what I'm most proud of, is building something that people care about. It's pretty incredible.
All right, that's where I'm going to end my questions, but we have time and we have a special microphone where you can ask a question. So who's got a question for Sean? No questions.
Easy.
I can see that, yeah. There's a question. Who wants to ask? You ready? Sean, you got a second. Into the microphone.
So do you have a close personal relationship with any of the band members on Burger Records, like Peach Kelly Pop or the Coat
Yeah,
Hangers,
I
or-
mean, we've known all these people for years and years, and it's not like a business relationship with any of our bands. It's always just a friendly kind. It's never like it's a very family-oriented, friendly kind of relationship with all of our bands. So I'm lucky it's not business-like, because the more business the Burger gets, the less fun it gets, for sure. Like, the more contracts and the more money that's involved, the less fun it gets. And the more that it's just about music and releasing music and turning people on is where I want it to be. So that's why I try and keep all of our relationships kind of friendly and formal.
As we wait for the next question, I had a question about contracts. Do you do the classic punk rock 50-50 split contract?
We do 50-50 splits, yeah.
And you don't?
And that's for the ones that we actually do have contracts for. We just started getting into contracts, and I've been saying that for 3 years. We just started getting into contracts. We still haven't even really gotten into it. We have a few of our bigger bands that we put a lot of money into signed, but for all the tapes and stuff, it's all handshake deals. And for working with all these labels like Sub Pop and Vice, we did Green Day with Warner Brothers just now. There was no contracts. There was nothing. We made the tapes and we sent it to them, and that was it. And
so if you were ever going to be like bought out by a big label, you'd be in big trouble, wouldn't you? There's all these like contracts with you. This is a good way of protecting yourself against
people
getting
want to buy Burger. They want to buy 50% of Burger.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not about buying what we own. It's about buying our image and how cool we are.
Right.
And I've learned that over the years. We haven't sold. We still are super poor and do everything ourselves.
This is one thing that we wanted to emphasize, because you said like a lot of people, the Burger
Yeah.
haters out there, think of you as sitting in like a pot of gold.
Yeah, there's people out there who really hate Burger Records because they have misconceptions about what we do and how we do it and our operation, and they think we have money, or that I don't know what they think. They think we have more than 3 people working for us. They think we have money. But I feel like if I sat down with any person for 2 minutes that hates Burger Records, I could convince them to like Burger Records. I'm 100% positive of that.
Well, this interview, I'm sure,
Yeah.
will convince them all. Good question.
Hey, I'm a little nervous to talk to you, but so kind of really quick 2-part question, I guess. One, how did you guys get involved and start doing stuff like Jam in the Van, and I know the Garden, when you had them, were the first thing I ever saw of you guys doing was the Garden, Jam in the Van, and then all of a sudden I learned about other bands on your label and not on them, through that, and like Sheepdogs and California Honey Drops and all that cool stuff. So how did stuff like that, at South by Southwest and little kind of fragments of Burger start to happen? And then second part is, I know you guys are small and, you kind of do your own work and stuff, but has anyone ever asked you about interning and working for you and stuff?
Yeah, the first question, sorry, repeat the first question. My short-term memory is shot, guys, sorry.
Just Jam in the Van.
Yeah, with Jam in the Van and stuff like that, it's mostly about us saying yes. Like, Jam in the Van sent us an email. I'd never heard of them. I didn't know what they are, but I was like, sure, why not? And they showed up, and they started recording our bands, and it's been a good relationship working with them. And everything, like any kind of relationship or thing that's kind of weird, that's like, how did they do that? It's all, we almost never go after things. It's all, we did Weezer's album, and that they called our shop one day, and the managers, and they were like, hey, we're having a meeting, and we want you to do their tape. And you know, a lot of people would be like, Weezer, you guys sellouts and all that stuff. But we grew up in high school with Weezer's Blue album, which is a perfect record, and Pinkerton as well. But so they hold a special place in our heart, which is why we did that. And it's interning and stuff like that. We get people all the time. Every once in a while, we'll do a call out for interns, and we make them write out all these things, and we make them take a picture in their room so we can see how they live in their room, whether it's clean or not, and we can see their handwriting and if they follow directions and stuff. Like if they don't write it out in their handwriting, we immediately get rid of it. And then we'll get like 10 people who come and intern with us, and then from those 10, probably like 4 will show up. Out of those 4, maybe 2 of them are cool people that we could actually hang out with, and the other 2 are just like incessantly asking questions or just there for the wrong reasons. And so twice a year we'll put out a call for interns, and we'll maybe get 2 interns from like 100 submissions. But I need interns all the time, so mostly it's people who show up one day and they show up to our shop and they're like, do you mind if I come by? Like start coming by and helping out? And we're like, sure, because that's what we do. We say sure. And then if they start to be super annoying, then we'll kind of shoo them out a little bit. We're not going to kick them out unless they're really bad, but we've been really lucky with the people we work with and the people close to us. Not so lucky with lawyers and things like that.
You got another question here at the back.
Yeah. How'd you guys get involved with NAR tapes?
So we knew NAR tapes because Lee met them through Mean Jeans up in Portland when he was on tour once. And then we really started working with them a lot when I was on Facebook and I saw Uncle Funkle had posted a Christian song that I was like, oh my God, this is like so good. This is the best. And I emailed them and I was like, this is the best. This is really just doesn't get any better than this. And then we just started hanging out and we discovered the Memories. And seriously, for 8 months, that was all we listened to was the Memories. They came and played our shop and we recorded it and we listened to that recording over and over and over and over and over again. To the point where they gave us a record of some of the songs that were on there. We're like, man, we don't even like the record. The live stuff is where it's at. And so we met with them, and then they moved to LA, and we started Narburger with them. I went over there to show them how to. They needed money. They needed to make some money quick, and I don't have money to give to people, so I went over there and showed them how to make money, and by the end they had like $3,000 by the end of the night because I had shown them how to use their skills and their internet and everything they had around them to actually make money with their label. And after that, they were like, hey, do you want to do Narburger, like the store in front? And I was like, sure, because that's what we say, and it worked out, and it was good.
All right, I think we got time for one more question. Angela.
Hi.
Hi.
So if Burger Records doesn't have a social or political mission, what's the motivation on expanding internationally? Is it to get exposure of the bands, of the label?
My job is to make the bands happy, so if it's to turn people on to music, and that's what I like to do. Like, I like discovering unknown bands. We put out the Muffs new record, and they're like an established known band for years and years. And I was like, wow, we sold a lot of records. Like, it was pretty crazy that people know about this band. It was really easy to sell these records. For the most part, when we put out records, it's a debut record, and we're like pushing and fighting, and like, please listen to this and give it a chance. And our mission is to get people to listen to music, and if there's people in Australia that want to listen to it, I want to be able to get them to hear it by any means possible. And I'm all for streaming, I'm all for downloading and sharing, and everything is any way you can listen to music. If it's iPhone, tape, I don't care. Like, I listen to it all, so I believe listen to music by any means necessary. And if there's people who say rock and roll is dead and stuff, or punk rock is dead. They're just lazy. They're not looking hard enough, because there's always something good going on. Any point in history of rock and roll, there's always a band that is blowing somebody's mind somewhere. You just have to look for them, and that's part of my job, is to look for the bands that are blowing people's minds and turn them on to more people.
That is a beautiful place to end. All right, thank you very much,
Cool.
Sean.
Thank you so much, everybody.